What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of Sit Down Saturday, and today we are going to talk about the effects that third party has on the main brand or the Hasbro brand, the proper brand of Transformers. But I'm going to just talk about it more so from my perspective. I'll give a little bit of insight in terms of industry stuff that I've looked into and sort of Sun Tzu, Art of War type stuff. But I think this week I'm going to try. I don't know how it's going to go. My goal this week is to try to do a Transformers collection video. A lot of people have been asking for it, like just specifically to see what my collection is like in terms of Transformers, kind of from top to bottom, as it were. I did one for Star Wars not too long ago, and a lot of people have asked for the Transformer one since then, so I figure I would do it this week if I can. That's my goal. Before we do that, I want to thank everybody that put in Dinobot blanket orders. I have made the order. I got emails going out. Everybody should have been touched base with. If you haven't been touched base with, please contact me. Thank you for the support. All right, a little bit of house cleaning this week, unfortunately, or fortunately for those that enjoy it. So for one, last week's Sit Down Saturday, which was the verses of the sound waves. And a lot of people were talking about, well, you should have compared the Magic Square one with paint. And that's valid. I was comparing the first release of each. If you want to compare the painted one, let's say that they're equal, just take the scores, equal out the paint, or go on to the next one and say maybe they're even better than the New Age paint, which I can't attest to. I haven't seen it, but just go ahead and go out on that limb, if you will, and then give Magic Square the point there. It doesn't change a whole lot about the final kind of grade in my opinion. It's interesting because I liked the Magic Square one a lot better scrutinizing it. That's the way the cookie tends to crumble with me. Some people asked if I would compare the tapes. The answer is no, only because it comes down to purchases, right? So the Magic Square separated those tapes a certain kind of way, and the New Age separated their tapes a certain way, and you can't really compare the two because they're not being released in the same bundles, basically. So it's not really comparing the same product. You can talk about it. I think that generally that Rumble is at least better than all of the tapes that New Age has done, the Magic Square Rumble, but it just doesn't make sense to compare them because you're not comparing two different purchases. It makes sense to compare for the sake of conversation, but not really for what we do here necessarily. Monday's video was the Batman MMC. Apparently I made some transformation errors in it. It happens from time to time. My apologies. I don't think it affected the final thoughts too much, but if it did, just strike those criticisms from it. I have looked at this mold before, so hopefully I got it right there. I think it's cool. I think it's a perfect kind of exclusive. It's one of my favorite exclusives I looked at. In spite of the transformation error. So, no issues there. Dummies with the fans toys. And look, a lot of people have had it with that conversation, and look, I'm with you. Being as though the dummies are such fans toys fans, it just felt like they had to weigh in. They wanted to weigh in. I wanted them to weigh in. So, those videos to me are like a trilogy. There's like the rumors part 1, rumors part 2, and then the dummy speculation. And that's kind of how it should be viewed. I think it's kind of conclusive, at least in terms of what you can guess. Now, obviously, we heard that this drag strip is coming, so that's great. It's great to hear it. We also heard that the DX9 is coming. You have to give me a little bit of leeway with the dummy stuff. We record 2 episodes, and those videos take me about 8 hours a piece. That's the reason why Jaina couldn't animate this past one, is because we recorded it late in the month, and by the time the editing takes place, there just wasn't time for her to get it done. And she's bummed about it. I know some of you guys were too, and so was I. But yeah, also with the Phoenix coming out, then hopefully these are all positive signs. I'm going to take it as such. There's been people that have said, I heard in the comments, that Hasbro is going to allow them to finish what they have already teased, and then that's it. I don't believe that to be true. That's not usually how that kind of stuff works. One last thing, I've kind of stayed off social media this week. I just needed a break from it for the most part. I still answer DMs and stuff, and obviously I still post it here and on Patreon every day, but I needed a break from it. I had a lot going on at the moment, arguably too much. I have a hard time saying no when people ask me to do things, and I probably should, but I just have a lot on my plate at the moment. So every second has counted. And with that, I think we can move on to today's episode. So what I want to do here is give you guys a little bit of history of my collecting with Transformers. And it's kind of going to lead into this Transformers collection, which is why I think it's important. So I'm not sure how slideshow heavy this will be. I may not have a whole lot of graphics and stuff for it, but I think it's an interesting conversation. Because one of the conversations that I've heard and have heard since I got into this is that Hasbro is financially affected by third party, and therefore third party is taking money out of their pocket. Now, I agree with half of that statement. I agree that Hasbro is being affected by third party. Now, let me explain to you why I disagree with the second half. Let's rewind the clocks back, these cops and lawyers, to about 2014, 2015. I finally get to a place in my life where I run into some disposable income. I hear from a lot of young people often who say, how can you afford this stuff? And I got news for you, just like as you move forward in life, hopefully, at least for me, like as I pushed in my personal life, like certain doors began to open up and certain opportunities began to present themselves, and I took advantage and was aggressive about taking advantage of those opportunities. As a result, I finally ran into some disposable income, and I hadn't bought a collectible in a very long time. I'd bought comics and stuff, just stuff to like read to kind of entertain me through the years, but I just kind of got out of collectibles. So the first collectible I bought getting back into it was a Play Arts Kai Arkham City Harley Quinn. I love Harley Quinn. I love DC Comics. I love the Arkham games, and I love that design specifically for her. But I looked at that price tag and I was like, $45, man. I don't know. That's an awful lot of money, which seems absurd now, but it kind of opened the floodgates back up. I got it. I enjoyed it. I couldn't believe the differences in engineering. I'd never looked at like an import figure. I couldn't believe the hand-painted details that went into it. I was mesmerized by it. So then I started to want others. I couldn't have just one. So I ended up finding myself on eBay. And I was really looking for more Play Arts Kai stuff. That was the stuff that I was like, look, I'm going to kind of pursue this line. And I did. And I did. Now, while I am getting back into collecting, I'm also starting to get back into video games. And the War for Cybertron, Fall of Cybertron video games were coming out. And a buddy of mine recommended it to me, and I played them, and it brought back that love for Transformers. So now, while I'm entering in Play Arts Kai into my eBay searches, now Transformers are starting to trickle in. I remember the masterpieces, or I think I remember masterpieces being released that I hadn't purchased, like when I was at cons and stuff, seeing them on display stands and being like, oh, they did more that I wasn't aware of. I had MPO1 and Megatron and Starscream, I think, and maybe the Seekers in general, but I thought I remember seeing others, Rodimus Prime, Grimlock, stuff like that, so I started entering that into my Google searches. I entered Masterpiece Transformers into my eBay search, and there was the Grimlock and the Rodimus and the MPO1 and the Starscreams, all the Seekers. They're still going to be there 30 years from now, and people type that into an eBay search. And then there was one that said Masterpiece Devastator. And I was like, I don't remember seeing this. And I clicked on it, and I saw TFC's Hercules. And I was like, this is absolutely incredible. This is the most amazing thing I've seen. Why is it called TFC Hercules and not Devastator? Maybe this is some Japanese version. Like, this is all the stuff that's going through my head, having no idea what was going on. So I went to the next logical step, at least for a guy like myself who's not super computer savvy, and I typed into a search bar TFC Hercules, and I stumbled upon online retailers selling it. And then I stumbled upon message boards that said third party. I started to put the pieces of the puzzle together, and I was hooked. I bought everything that Fans Project had put out that I was remotely interested in, which was pretty much everything but their city commanders. I bought TFC stuff. I bought iGear stuff. All the iGear stuff, I feel like. I bought it. I was like, man, I'm in. And between that, what I was experiencing with kind of putting my hands on import figures with like the Play Arts Kai, I was officially hook, line, and sinker back in. And then through the years, obviously, I was involved in podcasts, and I was involved in reviewing, and then all sorts of other stuff and ventures have kind of sprung from it, the art stuff. And it all kind of, boils down to that moment. But it was that moment. It was seeing TFC's Hercules. I wouldn't have had the same reaction seeing Combiner Wars Devastator or whatever that was called. I didn't have the same reaction of seeing other stuff that Hasbro was producing at the time. And had I not seen third party, I wouldn't have been interested in Hasbro. There's a number of things that keep people loyal to a brand. I'm not really loyal to the brand, with the exception of Fans Toys. However, even saying that, I'm not buying this Phoenix reissue. I didn't buy the clear versions or the painted versions or the X versions. Like, I don't play those games. I'm not in it for that. I'm in it for what looks good for my shelves and my displays. So I'm only loyal to a point. But there are a number of Hasbro loyalists, and I think that that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But there are components that have been kind of proven through business models of what makes someone loyal to a company. Let's take a look at it. And I'm going to focus on three main attributes that I've found. Communicating with customers. Forbes, online professionals, insights for professionals all agree that the ongoing and consistent communication channel with customers or consumers is a great way to create loyalty. 2, act on feedback. If people, whether through social media or customer service, identify problems they've experienced with your brand, you need to make sure you're acting on their feedback. When possible, it can make a big impact if you're able to send a customer details of how you've been able to respond to their concerns. Understand your consumers. More than ever, consumers want to feel that brands value them as individuals and understand their concerns. It is important to understand your target audience and their changing needs. At that time, 2015, would you say that that's what Hasbro was doing? Because I would say that that was not what they were doing. I would say that overall they were not listening to feedback. I would say that overall they did not understand their consumer base. I would say that overall they were not effectively communicating with their consumer base. I can't remember how many times I saw, like, why aren't they listening to us? We don't want this, we want this, we don't want that, we want this. It was common. But what was also common was their inability to act. Now, what we have seen over the course of the 5 to 6 years is they have listened. They have changed their direction. They have changed their ways. Now, through that period, there's also been a changing of the guard up there. And that may have a lot to do with it. And sometimes fresh blood is good. Sometimes it's terrible. Sometimes bringing in young people makes things, but like there's a number of components that affect that. But I want to talk about it for just a second with me, with it being a personal story. When I got back into this, I was hungry. I had a bloodthirst for Transformers. I wanted to have the collection that I always imagined having as a kid. And I ravenously ate it up. To include some of purchases that I wish I would have never laid eyes on. Some of the biggest wastes of money, and then lied to myself and told me it was great for years. But the Hasbro stuff didn't appeal to me. But as I started getting into third party more, I started thinking about Transformers more. I started watching the show more. I started drawing them more. I started picking up the comics. What's going on here? IDW. Wow, there's some really interesting stuff going on. It all started feeding it. I was like, I'm gonna go back and watch the live action movies, give them another chance. I was like, they're still not good. I'm gonna watch Beast Wars and give that another chance. Still not for me. I started getting into it crazy, heavy. And then before you knew it, third party couldn't produce enough to satisfy my appetite. So I bought Generation Skids. I liked them in the comics. I wanted to give them a shot. I bought the Springer. I bought the Dinobots movie stuff for my kids. I bought the video game stuff for my kids. Then I started buying more stuff for me. I bought the Metroplex. I bought the Scorponok later on. I bought the Trypticon. I bought the Brainstorm because of IDW. The Ultra Magnus because of IDW. I bought tons of Hasbro product, and it hungered my thirst for collecting in general. What did I end up doing? Got into Black Series, got into Marvel Legends. How much money have I spent with Hasbro? And you know why I spent all that money with Hasbro? Because TFC Hercules made me fall in love with Transformer toys again. That's a fact. Hasbro would have gotten none of that money. Who knows where my trajectory would have gone? My point is, there's something about keeping something modern and popularized and in the frontal lobe of the ether. And without the excitement and stuff that third party has pumped into that franchise for the past 5 and 6 years, that sinking ship would have never got the 3-hour movie that this one did. I'm not saying that third party saved Hasbro. I am saying that third party has pumped life into a brand that wasn't there before. I am saying that keeping a variety of pieces available to the market at diverse price points has added to the excitement of a franchise that was dwindling. And I'm not talking about the movie stuff that kind of pops ebbs and flows as the movies come out with like kind of come and go fans. I'm talking about your constant consumer fan base, the brand loyalty. We've also seen Hasbro give back to third party, right? Like how many times do I say in my reviews, then you combine or wars the leg down? That's Hasbro engineering that they have been inspired by, right? So one hand washes the other, but it's at least going both ways. And I wouldn't say it's 50-50, or at least it hasn't been for the past 5 years. It might be 50-50 now. Keeping people interested and excited in your franchise is what brings the boys to the yard with the money in their pockets, only to be quickly dispatched and given to you. So just a little bit of a personal story, a little bit of how third party has affected my spending habits habits, specifically with Hasbro, and that I think that regardless of how you feel about third party, love, hate, whatever, you think they're KOs, you think that they're just IP, whatever you think, I think you have to acknowledge the excitement it pumped into a brand. I remember sitting down with people that I work with and explaining to them why I was excited, and they thought it was the goofiest thing in the world when we started talking about it. By the end of it, I remember one specific time that I'll never forget where guys were like, "Look, I gotta see what you're talking about. Can you bring it up on the computer so we can take a look at it? I have to understand." Because it's just interesting. It's a classic portrayal of supply and demand boiled down into a 5-year span. And neither one of them work without the shortcomings and accomplishments of the other. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Until next time, take care.